Hey y'all, I hope you're having a great day today. This episode, I sit down with Kish Russell. She is a proven grant writing expert based in San Antonio, Texas. Kish has worked in education for over 20 years. She's got certifications out the wazoo from ESSA education through her Super Intendent cert. She's done lots of different stuff. She's been a kindergarten classroom teacher and taught college students. And now she works consulting with public and charter schools, with districts, with even higher ed institutions, providing phenomenal, dynamic guidance on all things grant writing and compliance. You can buy her books, you can buy her courses, hire her consulting services, or check out some phenomenal free resources she has on her website. It's kishrussell.com. That's KISHRUSSELL.com. I hope you enjoy hearing from Kish as much as I did. I've got Kish Russell here with me, a grants and compliance specialist. I barely know what that means, so I am so excited to kind of get into it and figure out all the stuff. And this podcast that we're doing, our kind of goal and mission is to help campus leaders, especially campus leaders who are new to the job or just feel under-resourced and feel like they have more questions than answers and don't know who to ask to get some good answers. And so thankfully, we've got some awesome people to ask questions, and I'm really excited about that. So Kish, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what school was like for you, where you're from, and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. So I started off as a kindergarten teacher many years ago. Working in Houston ISD, there was a high poverty campus. The needs of the students were really great. The parents, the language skills, communicating what they needed to bring for school. It was hard to break that barrier for the kids needing what they needed in school. And so the crayons and the backpacks and the glue and the scissors and all of that stuff, the school provided some of it, but in kindergarten you go through a lot of it. Right. There's a lot of using and consuming all the different materials that go into school. So with getting $27,000 a year for my first teaching job was, spending most of my paycheck on my classroom was really not sustainable financially. Yeah. So that's when I started asking for support from local businesses. I write on letterhead, would you be willing to donate $50, $100 to help us buy school supplies, art supplies, backpacks. Yeah. And so from that grew my success of wanting to reach out and do bigger grants. And so over the years I've learned, I've got a lot of no's and I've also gotten a lot of yeses. And so now working in as a kindergarten teacher for 10 years. I also worked in San Antonio ISD. Okay. And then that grew my experience as well in asking for money. And in 2008, I transitioned to district grant writer for San Antonio ISD.
Okay, so how did you make that jump?
Well, at the time, I was an overworked teacher.
Sure.
I was the gifted and talented coordinator. I was mentoring 2 new teachers. Yes. I was dyslexia coordinator for my campus. So all of that, I was like, I need something else besides teaching. Yeah. So I applied for the district grant writer job, and I remember when I interviewed for it, that of course that position has to go before the board. Okay. So it's like a 6-week time frame between your interview and when you actually get selected. Sure. So I'm teaching, and I get this. Someone comes in my classroom and says, "HR's on the phone for you," and I was like, "Oh no, what happened?"
Yeah, right.
So they were saying that I had gotten the job for grant writer, and I was like, "Well, wait, this is in October. We're getting ready for Halloween and all the fall festivities," and so that was my first a professional grant writer.
Did you have like any formal training before that, or did you just kind of figure it out of necessity?
My heart was always to get the kids the best that they could have, because
Sure.
working in high poverty schools, I've always felt that you need to kids, despite where they live or
Sure.
what family or their low income, they should always get the best, like high quality education opportunities for all students, no matter where they are. And so grants, when I would ask, oh, well, can we do this or can we buy this? And the response was, there's no money.
Right.
I didn't let that stop me.
Yeah.
So that's where I started, asking for money, and then figuring out grant applications are pretty standard. They want to know, what your background story is.
Sure.
They want to know what the needs are.
Sure.
What problem is going to be solved with the funds. What your plan for using the funds are. Who's going to be managing and responsible for implementing the program.
Sure.
The budget. They want to know how much you want a breakdown of what you're going to use the funds for, and then connect it to all of your goals and your problem. Everything has to connect.
Yeah.
It's very important. And then how you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of it. So
Sure.
it's pretty much a standard process that all grants ask for. So with that understanding, jumping into a grant, I always look for those components.
Okay.
So that way I can structure and strategize how to complete grant applications.
Okay. So now you're kind of the grant officer for the district, was that right?
Yeah, well, for the district, I was just the grant writer. So
Okay.
once the grants were awarded, then it would pass on to the next
Okay.
staff member in the
Okay.
district to manage and monitor all of that. And then after doing that for 3.5 years, I got my master's degree and my
Okay.
principal certification, which led me into federal programs compliance coordinator for San Antonio ISD again.
Okay. Cool.
So I did both the competitive grants and then the formula funded grants. So I have both experience on both sides.
Okay. Those competitive grants, how did you go about choosing what to pursue versus what not to pursue?
So each year we would create a strategic plan, or with the district improvement plan was kind of what led us to identifying what our priorities for funding are.
Okay.
And then sometimes a need would arise, like when we got a large population of certain migrant students, or there were students in the middle school that were dropping out of school. We're trying
Sure.
to capture those students back into the school district, so the grant funds would be targeted and prioritized for serving those specific needs.
As you go from a teacher that was kind of just asking local businesses for money into a grant writing position, where did you kind of start? Where can teachers start to look for money when they maybe want to go from just asking local businesses to pursuing larger grants? Or, how can teachers do that?
So one thing to keep in mind with grants is it's not an overnight, you ask for money and then they hand it.
Sure.
It can be a very long process. So the letter of support, a letter of request is what I usually recommend to get started with. And it's just usually campus letterhead, write your need, what the problem that you're going to solve with the money,
Sure.
how much money, and then just put a simple one-page request together. Give it to your local banks, your
Okay. Yeah.
businesses, anyone, real estate agents, insurance companies are very good about giving back.
Have you found a dollar amount that seems to be the ticket that, if you ask for $500, that typically how should teachers know how much to ask for?
No, that's a good question. So I recommend looking at what's reasonable and necessary for whatever you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to buy school supplies, $100, $200, or I like to create like a per pupil cost. So if I have 20 students in my classroom, I would say, $10 per student, it would be a reasonable cost. That's just, an example. But creating that kind of breakdown, it helps you as a grant writer or asking for money to know what is reasonable.
Sure.
Because sometimes people, they'll get really lofty. Oh, we want $50,000, and I'm like, well, what are you going to do with the $50,000? Yeah. Oh, well, we need to buy notebooks and paper. Right. And I'm like, well, do you need 50,000? Or, that's usually a request for where you add staff into the mix, or field trips and travel and transportation. So it's trying to create a reasonable methodology on how much to ask for is always good. And also, like, a very popular grant to get started with is like Lowe's will have a school grant, and it's not very long. It's maybe 5 or 6 questions. You just fill in the blanks, and that's a really good starting point. Target has one as well. Walmart, they have really easy grant applications you can get started with. And with those, it's usually, what is the need? Tell us about your organization, and how are the funds going to be used? And a lot of times they don't know how much to ask for, but like I said, being reasonable on looking through what exactly your budget's going to go for is going to be a very helpful method for that.
That makes sense. How can campus leaders support and empower teachers to do this? It takes some time. It takes energy to do all this research to start to understand something that you might not have understood. What can campus leaders do to help teachers? What did your campus leader do to help empower you to start writing grants? Or did they? What could they have done differently? Or what would you like to see in a dream scenario that a campus leader can do to help their teachers do this grant writing process when they already feel like, I can't do another thing, like how can I can't add to my plate. So how can our leaders support us in that?
I think allowing time. Now, I know time is precious. So maybe allowing a substitute day for that teacher to work on the grant might be one way to do it. Because that's one of the things that I always needed was more time. And trying to figure out how to manage that with my current workload was always a challenge.
Anything else that you could think of, or like how can campus administrators, is there a resource that they can give to teachers? Like, hey, I think we should, like, this would be a great way. You need some money for costumes for this recital, or you need supplies, or whatever it is that the kids need. Where can we go to find, like, is there a resource other than just like Target, Walmart, Winco, those to kind of help give us a jump start to where we can ask money? Or is it just trial and error?
So the Texas Education Agency has a website that's very popular, and it has a grant opportunities link at the top of their homepage. And you click on that, and then it has a drop down of so many different grant opportunities that are available. And those are kind of nice grants because the state does a really good job of formatting it into a way that anyone could fill out an application. And then they give the guidelines, so you look at the guidelines and you try to match what they're wanting to fund. So if it's for an after-school program, then all of your needs are going to be, well, why do you need an after-school program? What is the needs assessment that you've done to determine this grant is going to be a good fit? So I would highly recommend that as one of the starting points. And the state also provides a lot of good training and technical assistance on how to do those. Like they'll put webinars on and they'll post them in all of those grant resources. And then a nice thing they also do is the Texas Education Agency has grants awarded. So they have a web page where it lists all the grants that were awarded, and it lists the actual applications that were submitted.
Oh wow!
So you can see like how other people wrote up their application.
That is very helpful.
And learn from like what they put in there. Is just I find it to be a very helpful process to see.
Sure.
With that as a resource.
That's awesome. That's a great launch pad. So back to your story.
Yes.
So now you're working on both the federal grants and were you just doing like the federal grants at that point in time?
Yes. So the Title I, Title II, Title III, state compensatory education, all of those grant funds were, and private nonprofit schools was a big part of my work. Yes. And I had a team. At first, I didn't have a very large team because there was, as we built up the team in our federal programs department, then we started making really good strides with compliance, because compliance monitoring with as large of a school, we had 99 school-wide campuses to manage. So it was a lot of work, but amazing team. Yes.
Cool. So how long did you do that for?
I did that for about almost 4 years. And then I went to private sector as a grant consultant. And so I was the vice president of that organization for about almost three and a half years. And then I went in 2018, I started my own grant consulting
So tell me, I want to know about, if someone is really connecting to what you're saying and they want more information, tell us about like what services I know one of my campus leader friends has said, no one tells you about all the paperwork and all the like how much you don't realize when you step into this job.
So tell me, like, what are you doing now?
So I'm very responsive to the needs of my clients. So any school district, I work with school districts, charter schools, and then there are some private companies that reach out to me to help them communicate grants that are available for their clients. So I will provide that service as well. So anything from grant searching, where a school district says, we just need somebody to find grants within these focus areas to meet our financial and fiscal needs this year. And so then I'll hone my search for those grants as they come available or as they're announced. So I look at the U.S. Department of Education's website, the grants.gov, or the state, the Office of the Governor, the Texas Education Agency's website. Foundation grants, any foundations so the foundation, there's a really good resource that's kind of an outside of the box grant approach. It's the foundation directory. And it's usually most public libraries have access to it. Otherwise, it's a very expensive program to have to purchase a subscription. So I recommend your public library. But it's a nice database where it's wealthy benefactors that want to give money, but they don't have a foundation set up, so they'll donate money, or they'll create a mini foundation within the foundation directory, and with post opportunities for school districts, people who are looking for scholarship money. There's so many different
just foundations that have money and don't really know who to give it to.
So it's an opportunity, and usually their process is a lot quicker. like they'll have like 3 or 4 reviews of requests each year, and then the application is usually like a 2-page letter that you write, and you tell them what you need, and or there may be an application, but it's a very easy process to go through, and then and using that foundation directory as a resource is very good idea when you're getting started.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So one of the things that you do is help people find grants for what they need. What are some other things that you're doing now?
So I also, after, like, if they find a grant that they're interested in, then I will help them. I usually, all school districts are required to do a needs assessment annually for their district and their district improvement plan. So I'll use that as kind of the basis, and then meet with them, and I'll say, okay, well, here's the needs I'm seeing in your plan. Are there other needs that, or give me more context for? So create like an interview with them to know exactly why this grant is going to be the one to help them. With whatever needs that they have. And then also I scope the grant out very carefully, so that way they know, like, you have to have matching funds for this grant. And what that means for them is if they get $100,000, then they have to match it by 25% of that grant. So then sometimes they're not aware. They're like, oh, well, I don't know if we have that money to match. So maybe not at this time. Or sometimes the grant is in a short deadline, like it's a 6-month window, and then by the time they hire somebody for a position for a staff for the grant, then 3 months has gone by, and then they're not going to be able to use. So sometimes I look for those little things, knowing my clients' needs and how they operate, so that way they're not wasting time and money on a grant opportunity that is not going to work for them. And then I also application service or proposal development. So I'll work with them, and I'll create narratives, and look from their needs. I'll create a narrative that demonstrates, like, their the strengths within their community, their infrastructure, their capacity to implement a grant opportunity, and also utilize census data, so that way it really connects it to, because of course we shouldn't be writing grants on assumptions. Oh, well, they need the money. Well, why do they need the money? Well, they have the census data shows the community, the median income is $32,000 a year or something. There's a lot of English learners or not native English speakers in the area, so we need to create programs to help get them get jobs and education and other resources that may be necessary.
So tell me, that really interests me, the narrative creation, why that's so important in grant writing.
I think telling the story, and not just like with straight facts, but creating like the picture, like this is our community, and this is the work we do, and this is a success we've experienced, but we just need this grant to boost us to the next level, to really support, because we've identified in all the work that we do, what are the gaps in our services that we provide that really need this grant to really help us create a more robust program and services for our community.
To me, that's so compelling to think about, our little school, and I really like that. It's not something I think about when thinking about grant writing. You think about the numbers and the budgets and all of that, but what compels someone to want to grant money is that narrative and that story. That seems really important.
Yes.
So other than, I know that you also do some work with compliance, helping schools stay compliant. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so after they win the grant.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Got the money.
A lot of times they don't know where to start.
Sure.
So that's where I've created 6 books on grant compliance.
Okay.
So after the grants are awarded, then they know how to manage and monitor everything. So from creating a strategic plan, their improvement plans, to their needs assessments, to structuring job descriptions, how to create a job description that's tied and aligned to the purpose of the grant.
Sure.
How to create allowable and unallowable uses of funds, because sometimes you have people who get the grant and they're like, oh, well, we want to spend the money this way. And I'm like, okay, well, wait, it needs to be focused on the way that they want to allocate the funds for the grant. So you can't, it's not just a, having that structure and that plan in place allows them the clear understanding and picture of how to run and manage their program for success.
Sure, okay.
And then also the evaluation, because and the reporting. So once you get the money, sometimes there's reporting that goes along with it. And you also have to evaluate it and give that data and those results back to the funding agency.
Sure.
And then sometimes knowing the agency will give you up front what metrics that they want to see reported at the end of your program year, which is really helpful, because then you know how to create your if you're collecting survey data or if assessment data.
Sure.
You can start creating that plan. Yes, in advance.
Okay, gosh, this just seems like it would take so much time and so much resources to manage all of that. Tell me what are some of the primary mistakes that you see campus level administrators or district level administrators making when both applying for grants but then also staying compliant?
Well, one of the common things I see is you have to plan with the end in mind.
Okay.
So like when you're doing a grant, you have to say, okay, I would say at least 4 weeks on an average grant. If you need at least 4 weeks, if it's within 2 weeks, that you could run the risk of not getting everything together in time.
Okay.
You can do it, but you have to really know what your schedule is like and the time that goes into the grant. Because really, I would say 8 weeks is a prime time to really plan and pace yourself accordingly, because sometimes you need to get other people in your district involved. From your budget people need to know, help you without structuring how to set the budget up.
Sure.
You have your principals who may need to talking with them and meeting with them, like if we get this program, we're going to need to purchase new curriculum, or we're going to need to purchase computers. And then your purchasing department also needs to be involved, because there's a procurement process that goes along, especially with federal dollars. You can't just go to the store and buy any computer. You have to follow their procurement rules and approve vendors. So there's a lot of planning that goes into place, and knowing who your key collaborators are, from your district administration to all of your business and operations. And sometimes if it's like for field trips, you need to coordinate with your transportation department, or if it's snacks, with your food and nutrition. Need to be involved in all of that planning process. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to go on. And then but I would say planning and pacing yourself so that way you get everything accomplished within a timely manner. And also, when you're submitting a grant, the authorized official is usually the one who submits it, not the grant writer. So that's usually the superintendent. So you cannot give him or her last minute notice and say, oh, well, we need you to submit. Well, you need to give it to them a week in advance. This is our almost final draft. This is what we're doing. Because otherwise you can put yourself in a position where they're not available. And then you'll be at risk of not meeting the deadline.
Okay, so often not giving themselves enough time
Yes.
to go through that. Are there seasons to certain grants? Is there kind of a time of year that seems like, okay, this is when a lot of grants come online, so 8 weeks before that time is kind of when you can start doing the research, or 10 weeks or 12 weeks before that? Is there a seasonality to like private and competitive grants?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay.
They'll structure their grants so that way they can either for the new year. So at between September and December is when a lot of the grants will come out for the new year.
Okay.
So that way they can plan for their spending and corporate giving for those time frames. And then the state grants are a lot of times based on legislative priorities. For example, the school safety standards grant that's out currently was they announced it. TA announced it last year, but then they were waiting for all of the legislative finalizing everything before they actually released it, and it's due February 17th.
Okay. So it seems like that kind of maybe cycles with the school year. Come the fall, things are made available, applications are open for the next calendar year. Okay, that's good to know. What are some other things that campus leaders can do to help give themselves more time when grant writing and applying for grants?
Having a really good needs assessment in place and an improvement plan is going to be, once you have that in place, then you have most of the information you need to just get started, because everything should align with your plan and your needs. And if you have that in place, then really any grant opportunity is going to be a lot easier for you.
What makes a needs assessment a good needs assessment? Like how would campus leaders know if they've got a good needs assessment or not, if it's
really looking at all of the data. So in there's common categories, your demographics, your curriculum and instruction, your staffing needs, your operational needs, parent and family engagement, technology, then your school context and culture. School safety is a big one right now, and then your college and career readiness. Assessments, those are very common areas. So having needs identified in each of those different categories is really going to be helpful to determine, any need for a grant opportunity.
Okay. If I'm thinking of campus leaders in smaller or rural schools that might be wearing a lot of different hats. That might be superintendent and principal and parent liaison and all the different things. If they are kind of hearing this and thinking, I would like to have a more holistic and complete needs assessment, how can they fix that problem?
That is a good question. It's a very common problem where it's the time. Who has time? But it is a federal requirement that they do a needs assessment annually. So I think having them identify and have a specific date. That's what I always recommend, is that you schedule your needs assessment time every the first Monday of September or the first Monday of May. So you do your needs assessment in May for the upcoming school year, and then revisit it in September for the current year. Because sometimes you develop a needs assessment in the spring, and then projecting what you're going to have, and then the school year starts. Surprise! So that's a very helpful process to have in place, but really honoring that date as your needs assessment, so that way nothing else can get in the way. And then have a backup date, because sometimes something happens with that one date.
Okay, great. So you'll kind of act as a consultant and help grant officers kind of go through this process. Who do you mostly work with? Do you mostly work with district level officials or campus level?
Most of the time it's assistant superintendents. For the smaller districts, it'll be the superintendent who will reach
Sure.
out to me. A lot of, and then from there, I'll ask who my point of contact will be, so that way I can make requests, and then I create, after the grant is selected, then I'll go through the grant, identify all the information that's needed.
Okay.
And then a lot of it we'll try to get from the needs assessment and the improvement plan, but then whatever, is not available in those documents, then
Sure.
we'll fill in the blanks with that. And usually that takes place in an interview. I'll schedule a meeting with them, and it may be a few meetings, because sometimes they'll bring other people in with questions. A grant should be a collaborative process and not just be one person doing making all the decisions for the grant.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to get other people's input into. Now, I have seen some people will say, okay, I want you to write this part, and you to write this part, and you to write this part.
Okay.
And the challenge that comes about sometimes is that the voice in the grant is not the same. So that is a good process to delegate that work out, but then have one person come back and then look at the narrative to create that singular voice, and so that way it's all a focused approach in the grant.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. I know that you will come to schools or districts and do some kind of PD or training. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so sometimes I'll, depending on what type of service they want, if it's application or if it's post-application, I'll come and do trainings for them on what the grant's about, how to get set up, how to get it structured, and then I'll create a plan for this is the first phase, our needs assessment phase, and then we're going to create our plan. So that way, between that 8-week time period, hopefully, sometimes it's less, that's okay, we'll create that plan to make sure that everything's phased out. No one's rushed and stressed out, because no one has, that's not good for anyone to be stressed about these things. I always tell them, you excel at what you do best, and let me excel at this part, and getting all this together, so that way you can continue your work as what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that, about what happens in a district once you've been able to walk them through that process with their first big grant.
So it's I try to minimize the burden on the district as much as I can, because as a grant writer, I have access to a lot of information, and so and then doing research with all of the different data sources, because you want to put it with best practices. Any grant should be based on best practices. Unless it is a pilot, then that's another type of grant. So having them I'm sorry, I think I forgot your question.
That's okay.
I was thinking on something else.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm wondering what happens to a district. They feel like they know that there's grants out there. They don't really know either how to access them, or just want more training, or want to be able to do a better job of that. So then they bring you on. Is it the kind of thing that once you've walked through that the first time, then doing it again and again and again is easier?
Yes, so it creates a method for them to know how to start it, how to process it in the middle, and then how to complete it. So having one, and having an example, because a lot of times when you write a grant, that person may have written the grant in the district, and then they move, or they transfer, or they go to a different position, and then that computer, wherever that grant was stored, they don't know where to find it. So that's where I like to create a historical record for the district, so anyone can access. They just call me up and say, that grant we wrote 2 years ago, do you have a copy of it? And then I get it to them, so that way they can know what was written and what they did last time, so it gives them a starting point where you're not starting from scratch.
Right.
Because your story is your story for the most part. Your needs do change,
right.
but your organization, the mission and the vision is always going to be a consistent message throughout any grant application. So having that historical, and I always recommend that when a grant is written, that it's stored in a location or a place that anyone can access. It's not on one person's computer, but it's in a shared drive or a server that can be accessed.
Right.
Whenever.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And not walk off with whoever wrote it. What would be some of the easiest to get and easiest to manage grants for campus level leaders or teachers?
So I recommend anything under $10,000.
Okay.
Because $10,000 is a pretty manageable grant. When you get, well, 50,000, 10,000 are pretty reasonable.
Okay.
You get into the 100,000, that's when all the reporting gets into play, and then you have to make sure that you have the staff and the time to do all the reporting for that. So that's probably a good threshold to keep to use for any grant, because sometimes the grant will have specific requirements that you have to follow and manage. Looking at their data requirements is going to be very helpful. So like I mentioned before, like your Walmart, Target, Lowe's, Home Depot, those kind of grants. Banks also have grants that they give out that are going to be less burdensome for schools to manage easy. And sometimes the turnaround time is a little quicker. Because they'll have multiple cycles of funding requests, so that way it gives you access to the money in a shorter time frame. And a lot of times looking at grants, I will say you have to be careful, because some grants they're posed as grants, but they really cost you money. Any grant that costs you money is not a grant. You should not have to pay money. Or sometimes they'll say, oh, well, you get 50% off. Well, that's a coupon. Or some companies will say, oh, well, we have this grant for our product, and you get 50% off. Well, that's a discount. And you can only buy their product. It's not like you can buy anyone else's product. So
okay, those are good things to keep in mind.
Yes.
So what would be some common restrictions that teachers or campus leaders or district leaders would need to watch out for?
So a lot of grants require a 501c3 status, tax exempt status. So most school districts do not have tax exempt status. So they need to either work with their education foundation and utilize their 501c3 status to access that grant. Sometimes it requires that their SAM.gov registration is active. And if that's not active or it's expired, then that can also limit access to grants, because that's where grants, all the federal and the state grants, rely on that registration to be active. So that's a very important one too. And then sometimes it's geographic location that the grant will specify we want to serve only projects that are going to serve this geographic location.
If there is like one thing that you would like every campus leader to know, what would that one thing be?
Keep trying.
Just
try. The first time you do it, it may not work out. But you just have to keep going, build on your success, and then before you know it, your success rate will increase. Just like with any athlete, you just the first time you throw the basketball, it might not go in the hoop, but then you keep trying and you keep trying, and eventually you'll win the game.
That's good to, especially getting no's over and over again. Like, isn't easy, but that's good.
Well, that makes me think about another tip that's useful. So, looking at a grant, if they're only making 5 awards
Okay.
across the whole nation,
Okay.
you have to know that they're probably going to get thousands of applications.
Sure.
And so, if you're going to decide to invest the time and energy into that grant, your grant will need to be really compelling,
Sure.
really innovative to make it to
Right.
that top 5 category.
Right.
So that was one of my first grants I wrote was for the Toyota Tapestry grant.
Okay.
For a garden for our school.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember I was so excited and I
Yeah.
put so much time and energy, and then they only awarded 10 grants that year,
Yeah.
and they had thousands of applications.
Sure.
But I tried.
Yeah.
I got my my practice in for writing a grant,
Yeah.
and so it all leads to good things.
Yeah. And then Tommy had asked about like sharing a success story. I'd love to hear a story about a district or a campus that worked really hard either with you or just to get a grant, and what they can do with that to just encourage campus leaders listening that feel like that sounds great, but I don't have time for that, or I would love to be able to do that, but I just can't. We know that it's worth that time and energy, but I'd love to hear a story about it being worth that time and energy.
Yes, well, one grant that stands out in my mind
Yeah.
is in San Antonio ISD, there was a program, it was a dropout recovery program.
Okay.
And so there were a lot, at a particular campus, there were a lot of kids who were in the juvenile detention centers, or lots of trouble in their lives. And so the grant provided a mentoring with a specific program that did the ankle monitors,
Okay.
the bracelets,
Yeah.
and then so the stories that came back from the families and the teachers were so impactful that, like, these kids who and the great thing about the grant, it was not just the ankle monitors, but it also gave them, every student got a phone call every morning. Good morning, this is your friendly wake-up call. Today, don't forget you have this due in your homework, or did you finish that homework assignment? So someone was constantly checking in on them.
Wow.
For it was a very expensive program, but it was a very
Yeah.
impactful program.
Yeah.
And those kids ended up graduating, finishing. These were middle school kids that were going to be, dropping out
Sure.
of school, getting
Sure.
into trouble. But now, after hearing the stories, and it was a 3-year grant program, and
Wow.
it was just beautiful.
Yeah. That sounds so cool. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience, or anything else that you would like to? I've heard that maybe you have a new book out.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, I just published my state compensatory education compliance
Awesome.
by design.
Okay.
So that is to help the school districts to know how to manage and monitor all the compliance with state requirements
Okay.
for at-risk kids. It's all about how to identify the students correctly, get them coded in the system, get them connected with the support services in the district,
yeah.
creating their budgets and their allocations, monitoring progress of those students to make sure that they meet their close the achievement gaps in reading and math specifically. So then also the program evaluating the effectiveness of those services for
Wow.
those students.
Okay.
So yes.
Awesome. So where can we find that?
On my website,
Okay.
yes, at kishrussell.com/books and trainings. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Kish, thank you so much. This was amazing. Thanks everyone that watched live or live after the fact. This will be on our podcast when we start releasing episodes, and we'll be sure to let you know so you can share that with your people
Oh,
too.
thank you. Thank you so much.
There you go, folks. I hope that you found that as insightful and informative as I did. I loved getting to talk with Kish. If you have any questions or would like to be connected with Kish or find out more, you're always welcome to email me, beth@responsivelearning.com, or you can go to Kish's website. It's kishrussell.com, KISHRUSSELL.com. russell.com. She's got a lot of great tools and resources for you there. This production is made possible by the work of Erwin Solbach. He does the music for this that you hear right now. That's Erwin. And he does all of the production and editing for this podcast. Our logo and design work is by Alana Kanoy. And all of this is made possible from the folks at Responsive Learning. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day.